creation.
Thanks, everyone.
And water and its ability to increase human settlement. So if you're recycling those nutrients, if you're processing those wastes, if you're increasing your water storage, if you're increasing the tree cover, vegetation, and the nutrient density of your intake, then you're reducing the inputs of your need to get that nutrient from outside sources. And so the people that are on that land or in that settlement or community are going to be a lot more resilient and a lot happier and a lot more abundant. And so the idea is that we increase that resilience by applying sensible design. And I've been interested in permaculture for close to a decade. When I started learning about some of the things happening in the world, I found permaculture as a kind of a best design or best fit solution that solved a whole bunch of problems in one area of study. And what I've come to learn about permaculture is that it doesn't discriminate. It references and looks at all available information that's available in the world that is designed to increase our resilience. And for wherever you are in the world, for your climate or what sort of situation you're dealing with geopolitically, there are solutions available that you can employ. And those solutions will be different depending on which climate you're in and the available resources. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. In the last 10 years since I've been involved in permaculture, I've been on a range of different farms and applying some of those solutions in broad acreage as well as some rural, some urban solutions as well. So it's good to know that you can actually retrofit the urban landscape, and you can apply some of these techniques and strategies to where you're living, as well as it's good to get out and into the lands and put bigger systems in place. Yeah, so all of you are going to have maybe different diverse backgrounds and going to be coming from different sort of areas of interest. So it'd be really good to see if there's any questions out there that anybody has specifically for permaculture. My sort of area of study, or the area of permaculture that I'm the strongest in, will be water management, water harvesting, putting in dams, swales. I've worked in the construction industry in the last 6-7 years, almost full time, as well as being a musician and doing some sort of freelance consulting work in permaculture. I've been using the construction industry to increase my skill set in the machinery that's needed to put some of this water harvesting infrastructure in the landscape. So things like learning how to implement dams and swales. So swales are the contour ditches that basically collect rainwater runoff. It comes into the ditches and then moves into the dam or into your planting benches and systems or into leaky weirs. So all these are basically different techniques and different strategies to collect as much rainwater as possible, but also to slow the water down and to pacify the energy of water. So we don't want a tsunami of water coming through our property and taking off all that topsoil or damaging some of the other systems or livestock that we've got. We want to pacify that energy, and the same with the wind. So permaculture will basically apply a design specific to your site, taking in a range of different factors, and the main information are things like the available sunlight and the average annual rainfall, and looking at the prevailing winds, the strength and direction. And then also looking at things like fire history, plus the indigenous significance, the the way the Indigenous, used to use the land, if that knowledge is available. So it's really worthwhile connecting in with elders and, inviting them out and, having them involved in the design process. So a big part of my heart is involved in increasing community and, inviting participation from not only the ancestors the elders, but everybody. So permaculture is a people-focused art form. And I say art form because you can have all the knowledge in the world that you want, but the art is in being able to select that knowledge and respond accordingly to how you're applying it to the systems that you're implementing. And so it can be very simple, but it can be endlessly complex as well. So you can go out and do a PhD in soil microbiology, which, I highly recommend that you take a deep interest in soil. Another deep interest of mine is compost and increasing and creating, that soil nutrient density. So what we can do to increase the soil fertility over time, as we've experienced with modern agriculture, they get about 20 years of use out of arable land before it's salted up and you have to walk away from it at that point. There's nothing that can be done after the land's salted up. And the land will salt up over increased and continued use of fertilizers and biocides. There was a scientist that received a Nobel Prize quite a long time ago, I think around the time of World War II, for finding a way to actually isolate the elements of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and basically put them in what's called a cadmium salt. And so the salt binds the elements up, and then they become liquefied in the ground. And the roots of the plants are hydraulic, which means that through the liquid, they have to draw that NPK up. NPK are the letters that represent the chemical elements. So N for nitrogen, P for phosphorus, and K for potassium. So they're the three macronutrients that, that will be prevalent in a healthy soil. But in a cadmium salt, they leave the salt behind in the ground while the plants drink up and pull up the macronutrients. So, things like onions, for example, have 21 different sprays that will be applied to the ground over the sort of the span, which is about 180 days growing. So they're probably one of the worst affected crops in existence. But there's plenty out there: soy, potatoes, most ground crops, and even in certified organic, there are a certain number of approved sprays, like copper sulfate and other things that we generally don't want to necessarily have to be taking as an amendment. So permaculture is concerned with very much integrating in a very natural way, in a holistic, healthy, and harmonic way, as a way that we relate to the land and each other. There's also another sort of concept I'm really a fan of with permaculture, and that's if none of you are familiar with permaculture as a design concept, very basically we talk about zones. So zone 0 is actually inside the house. Zone 1 is immediately outside the house. Zone 2 is a little bit further away. Zone 3, a bit further again. Zone 4, and then zone 5. Anything in zone 5 is considered in the forest. It's in the woods. It's outside the area of immediate environmental influence to your life or your community. So that's where you'd go and collect the firewood, or you would go once a year and collect the walnuts when they're available. You don't need your walnut house tree straight over your house. So with that, it gives you a bit of a relational way of applying the design. So when you want to put the elements into your system, like your chook house or like your walnut tree, you'll actually consider which zone am I going to put that in? How many times do I need to visit that? But there's another element that that we're talking about now. It's called Zone 00, and that's the psychological landscape. So that's how you relate to your land. You know, they're the psychological challenges that, you know, that we're all sort of facing as humans, the things that we're learning about ourselves, and we want to work through those as well. You know, because that will basically become a relational exercise of how we relate to our land and each other. And so while we want to improve the soil and we want to improve our land's carrying capacity in a harmonic way, we also want to improve ourselves and our relationship to understanding our own patterns and becoming accountable to, you know, to the vibration that we're creating in ourselves, what we're consuming in terms of media. Yeah, and just having an awareness and just starting to take notice of, you know, who you are in yourself and where you're at and how you're relating to the world, what you're consuming in terms of your media, and yeah, bringing a greater sense of well-being back into that land and that place that you're improving as well. So that being said, the next most important thing in a permaculture design will be the sectors. So your wind sector, your water sector, your fire sector. So as well as interfacing with your Indigenous community. It's also quite good to get involved with like the Rural Fire Service. They have really good historical data on things like fire history. It's really good to understand, you know, what prevalence or direction fire can come from if it poses a threat to your particular area. And it's good to design with that in mind from the get-go. So if you come to land that is completely cleared, has been overgrazed and just been traditionally used for livestock, then understanding your fire sector will help you implement, you know, there's certain sort of fire retardant tree species which you may plant along a fire break in that particular direction. Those trees will just hydraulically accumulate more water, and they'll store the water in their trunk and their leaves. So any sort of fire that's coming through that direction will hit those trees, and the trees will basically put the fire out. It'll basically suck all the intensity out of the fire before it has the ability to kind of move into the canopy and through and damage, you know, other areas of your property or your structures.
David, can I just interrupt with a question there?
Sure.
What trees would they be? Would it be non-natives like willows and poplars, or what would be the choice of tree?
Like Kurrajong trees and different trees that are like actually you speak.
Willow and agapanthus are two amazing examples that, you know, that I'm immediately aware of.
Yeah.
So both of those are non-native. Both of those are considered to be a pest, which brings up an important point. When I was brought up as a child, my stepdad was a horticulturalist. And one of the things that really deterred me from horticulture more than anything was seeing him stand there with a hose in his hand for 2 hours a day, watering this massive garden. And, you know, being an active child and just not able to sit still, nothing, you know, I just couldn't think of anything worse than just standing there with a hose with just the water coming out. And the other thing he used to use was like weed killer. So, you know, we're all familiar with, you know, these products. We've all grown up around them, and, you know, we've all sort of become familiar with this, you know, this term weed. And it wasn't until I started learning permaculture and started listening to, you know, some of some of the gurus that have taught me and people that, you know, I consider amazing teachers in this field, I've actually taken that word completely out of my vocabulary. So I kind of see all plants as opportunists. Anything that's evolved, like anything surviving, anything that's alive today, anything that's evolved and currently alive, that hasn't gone extinct, is just responding to a niche and an opportunity. It's basically placed its existence in a foothold, an area of life that is intersecting a life web of interconnections between other elements of life. And we might look at something like lantana and go, oh, geez, that's invasive, or it's a pest, or it's a problem, and it was introduced. But lantana is just doing what it knows how to do, and that's just grow. And yeah, some guru I heard in the past has said, what do you think the purpose of life is? And, you know, someone said it's just to exist, it's to procreate, it's to, you know, it's to continue living, you know, think about the will to live. And if you apply that to yourself, you know, there's not really too many pests out there. It's just our sort of, our mind and our concepts. It's the way that we relate to, you know, sometimes sometimes we can look at certain things and look at it through eyes of, you know, our cultural programming. So I've managed to go back in and remove that cultural programming and see, well, what that's enabled me to see is that instead of calling something a weed, I now just call it a willow tree, or I'll call it an agapanthus. So it's back to its original name. Yeah. Lantana is actually an amazing, it's an amazing mulch and ground cover. Agapanthus is a fire retardant species. People demonize agapanthus a lot because it's a home to slugs and snails. But one of my teachers in permaculture said that if snails and slugs are living inside a particular plant, it's because it's a fire retardant species, because snails and slugs are the most susceptible to fire. You know, they can't exist. They can't outrun a fire. They can't get away from it. So they'll actually take up residence in plants that will put the fire out. With willows have been demonized to be quite destructive in terms of sucking all the water out of creeks and river systems. But if we have more sensible behaviour upstream in terms of water harvesting and, you know, increasing our water storages, which is increasing the groundwater, if we're contributing to good, you know, positive infrastructural design in terms of the way that we implement this design, then the willows will actually have a root structure that will halt erosion, just like lamandras and just other sensible planting regimes to try and hold onto that soil.
Yeah. Can I just ask also, what are your thoughts on using bamboo in that way? Does bamboo hold much water?
Yeah, there's about 2,000 different varieties of bamboo, some of them clumping, some of them running. And yeah, as far as their ability to, you know, retard fire, I'm not 100% sure of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that answer your question, Susan?
Yes, yeah, it does. Thank you. And it's validating for me as well. I've just been, I've spent some time with Peter Andrews.
Yep.
Yeah, learning about contours and what he does. And I've just started to get interested in syntropic as well.
Yep.
But I've received a bit of flack, just because, of the non-native thing. I've worked for national parks, and so, you know, I'm around ecologists and other people that have like different views, and my sentiments are similar to yours. So thank you. You've just validated, you know, I mean, if you want to rehabilitate the land, nothing's going to grow there well, not even a native, you know, so you might as well start with what will help you retain water in the soil, and yeah, and also create a fire retardant barrier, right?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that makes, I guess, me work in the capacity that I'm in is that I'm not native to this land. You know, I have Anglo history, I guess, regardless of where my forebearers and ancestors have come from. We're all indigenous to planet Earth, and I'm trying to encourage people, you know, to have a relationship to the planet. And, you know, heard of chaos theory, you know, the flap of a butterfly's wings,
Yeah,
and contribute to storms on the other side of the planet. And
So,
it's just
David, one of the things that we were talking about is no waste. So how can we, you know, really start to use the land, and especially if we're living in off-grid situations, that we can really start to have a no waste, no toxic environment?
it's probably one of the greatest challenges that's facing humanity at the moment. The easiest way to deal with no waste is to not bring it in. So, you know, the biggest thing that we're dealing with are things like plastics, and you know, you can implement strategies technologically to deal with things like plastics, or you know, if you can melt metals back down to, you know, create the potential to use that as another resource. It's very difficult to remove waste altogether, but it is definitely a very necessary consideration. So probably our biggest waste is generally our food waste, in terms of, you know, what we're throwing away, but then also our feces. So I've been brought up in, you know, in towns and suburban environments, always with flush toilets. And I didn't start building composting toilets till about 5 or 6 years ago. But every time I go out into the rural landscape now, it's usually going out to permaculture properties, and they're almost always composting toilets. And now I'm the one that's actually conducting the workshops on teaching people how to compost human poo appropriately, effectively, safely, and how to actually look at it as a resource and so another opportunity. So yeah, if we can have more of an attitude of being responsible for our, you know, for the waste that we're contributing, it's actually probably then not so much a waste product. It's actually just another resource. It's another opportunity. You know, when you're designing, when you're trying to audit a system in terms of its level of sustainability, you look directly at the pollution. So if there's any pollution, you know, for example, the smoke coming out of the tailpipe of your car, you know, or the smoke that's coming off your fire, or, you know, all the unused elements that are washing through your system back into the streams, you know, like the fertilizers that we see from, you know, the agricultural industry, creating the algal blooms in our, you know, in our rivers, in our waters. So all of these are the elements that, you know, you can see as your waste products. So by reclaiming those, they'll become opportunities to reinvest that energy back into your system. So, for example, with your human waste, with your feces, once that's composted properly, that's fine to go back into, you know, into your growing systems, into your trees, into your perennials. They generally say don't use it in your annual gardens where you're pulling a root crop out, you know, like your potatoes and your carrots and your beetroot and your onions. When I teach this particular style of composting, I've actually used my hand, barehanded, and reached into the pile, grabbed a whole chunk of this stuff out of the pile and smelt it and held it around for everyone to had a smell. Not even 10 days after building it. And that was using about 20 buckets, 20 litre buckets filled with human poo. And then also used about 2 full tubs of like fresh chook manure. So this compost pile was just absolutely jam-packed, full of feces and full of poo. And yeah, after 10 days, that smell had completely gone. It was still there at the first turn. So you turn this compost pile, and that's how you manage the process of breakdown. It'll break down in about 4 weeks, 3 if you've done everything by the book. If not, and it's not working like to textbook, it will just take a little bit longer. And if it's a total failure and it's not cooking because it's a hot compost system, then you can apply other amendments and use other strategies to get it to its breakdown capacity. The thing that makes it safe is that the hot composting method will increase the temperature between about 60 and 70 degrees Celsius. And at that temperature, absolutely everything cooks. All pathogens are gone. All weed seeds are completely useless. So if you're composting things like hay or straw that have come from the land and got weed seeds or grass seeds, if you're composting horse poo, their stomachs only have a single digestion system, so grass seeds will germinate out of horse poo. It'll basically eradicate, all seeds and all pathogens. So that would be safe to use anywhere, but generally speaking, you just use that particular style of compost to look after your perennial tree systems.
Yeah, which is very interesting because I was all for a long drop system, but after talking to you, you had me see that that's probably not the best way to go.
Mm-hmm.
For everyone else who wasn't part of that conversation, can you describe more about why you wouldn't dig a hole and why would use this?
Yeah, I have a really intimate memory of long drops from about the age of 6 or 7 years old on a friend's property up in the border of New South Wales and Queensland. So they're right up there in the rainforest, and long drops are a common practice, where you couldn't install a septic, or it was just basically like, let's just dig a big hole and it'll take us 2 years to fill it up, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do then. And it's usually dig another hole next to it and just move these toilets along. So what that does is it creates a really bad stain in your memory, for one, because the smell of sitting on that toilet, especially after it's half full, nothing's breaking down in there. And then also all of your weeds are going in. So what will actually eventually happen is that even though you've carved the hole into the earth is porous. So are rocks, actually. So, liquids and water will basically fill up and then soak in. But what will actually happen is that the material will get to saturation point and it can't soak in any more water. So it has to wait for that water to drain through before it'll actually accept and pull and receive in anymore, which is why we use swales, and we'll get to them later. So with a long drop, once that starts filling up with all the urine as well as the fecal matter, it creates an anaerobic situation, which means it's devoid of oxygen. So anywhere that's inoxic or anaerobic basically means that you've got a really toxic environment for breakdown. There are still bacteria that will thrive in an anaerobic situation, but it's at very toxic levels. So it's outside of the range of what you'd call a safe system. So there's bacteria and fungus involved in all areas of life. When you're standing inside a healthy forest, you've generally got a relationship of about 95% healthy bacteria and fungi, and there's probably about 5% that's not good for you. But because of the 95% healthy, ratio, 95 to 5, that 95 keeps that 5 in check. That 5% can't normally get into plague proportions or get a foothold because there's just too many elements and too much diversity. So that's why when you walk through a jungle or a forest that hasn't been cut down, hasn't been touched, that's generally why, you know, that system is so stable, is because of that intrinsic diversity. Yeah, so that's why you wouldn't do a long drop, because you don't want an anaerobic situation. They're very smelly, and if something's smelling, that is an indication that something's not working, something's not right. And that's why a lot of people will put their composting toilets right up the back of the property or right on the fence line, or they'll stick it right out of the way, you know, and they'll put it out in zone 3 or 4 or 5, you know, but it actually needs to be in zone 2, you know, or inside, you know. I had my composting toilets inside the house. Actually, on the other hard drive, I've got all the photos, but yeah, I can dig them out if anyone's interested. If you want to, you know, design or incorporate that thing into your own sort of living, that's where we can solve and work out, you know, with the situation, what we can do, you know, to retrofit the design that's going to work for you, or get you involved with communities like Jeff and Peter that are out there near Lithgow, you know, using their lands, you know, to create this abundance, to build community and invite community in a way that, yeah, is mutually beneficial. So just to give you guys, I don't know if you're all familiar with Jeff and Peter, but just a quick introduction. They're on acreage about 40 acres, about 30 k's out of Lithgow. So out in Wiradjuri country, where you're from. And, you know, and that's a lot of land, you know, and, you know, 2 blokes can use a lot of help, you know, especially in building community. And, you know, if people have, you know, that value of contributing to the land and building community and working with each other, you know, then they're the people Jeff and Peter are looking for, you know, to come out and exchange and, you know, the opportunity to work alongside them and see what they've been building. And they've got over 100 fruit trees in already. They've got 2 dams, and they've got, between the 2 of them, you know, a range of incredible skills that they're connecting in with their land, and to anybody that's like-minded and like-hearted that, you know, can work in and facilitate, you know, some of those longer range visions. So, you know, to build that properly, it's going to take all of us. Yeah.
And we're going to do a workshop, aren't we, David, out there, maybe in a couple of weeks or towards the end of the year or next year?
Yeah, can I just get an indication from everybody in the group that's listening, you know, who's interested in learning about, well, what we're talking about now, composting human food?
Maybe you can, show of hands or find the reactions button and thumbs up on the reactions button.
I know it's going to be harder for some of our family down here in Melbourne and Queensland, but with technology, you know, we could live stream the workshop. Although Jeff and Peter did say the bandwidth out there at the farm is not 100% amazing, but I've actually been wanting to do a video on these composting methods, and it'd be a good opportunity to do that and actually create some media out there to demonstrate these methods.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we're going to open it up for questions, but what tips do you have that people can start using at home where they are right now? We, you know, if we can't wait to get out on the land to start using some of these permaculture ideas, what can we do at home?
Get involved with your local food co-op. That's a big one. And yeah, find out if you can't grow immediately in the ground and the land where you are, Also, it's a good idea to get involved with a local community garden, and and also find out, like the local council initiatives. They, if you don't have compost or if you can't compost, they'll generally collect green waste, and a lot of them will process food scraps as well. And so those resources are increasing. And
Box Divvy Co-op right here. If anyone's interested, Quakers Hill.
Gabriel, where are you? Sorry, you run the food co-op, do you?
Yeah, we've started one. We're still waiting on another 4 members to join before they start.
Okay.
But before we can start. But yeah, so.
Okay, cool. And how do
Quakers
you
Hill.
guys? Who do you guys link in with in terms of your producers?
We do it through Box Divvy, which is like a company which organizes the produce from local farmers and growers and backyard growers and all that, and they bring the food over to us. We'll be a hub where the food will be there, and people can come in and grab the food from us, which we've put in boxes and things like that.
Cool.
We're trying to start that community over here.
Perfect, man. That's great. Can you put a link in the comment to you guys, and also Box Divvy, just so anybody that's interested can jump in and have a look at those guys?
Will do.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic way. Start exchanging, with your neighbours. Get to know yourself and walk across, the street and chat with your neighbours. Reintegrate with the community where you are. One of the really, what's that?
Chookies.
Yeah, get some chooks. One of the beautiful maxims in permaculture is think globally, act locally. So it's about taking more ownership into into bringing some of this awareness that we have of the world, but actually putting foot to ground to make it happen where we're living. It's quite common to lead a very anonymous life, when we're living in apartment blocks in the cities, and we can often walk down the hall and not know who's living across from us, or but especially some of the elders in the community. It's really good to just to tune in with them and stop by, have a chat, make sure they're okay, and start to exchange resources with the people that are living around you. Information is a resource, so having that 5-minute chat with an elder will probably turn into a 20-minute chat, because they're all so full of history and stories and a wealth of wisdom and experience. And it's really, really beautiful to tap into that. Yeah. On YouTube, there's a wealth of permaculture information out there in the world as well. I did a video about 6 years ago teaching people how to build a self-watering wicking garden, which is a really beautiful urban hack. Equally as applicable in the rural landscape as well. And it's just taking that rainwater off your roof through a garden bed and then into the stormwater path. Because as you notice, as you look around the cities, these sort of hardware civil infrastructure, these hardware surfaces, all this concrete, all these tarred roads, are about taking all the rainwater runoff and getting rid of it as quick as possible and sending it downstream as fast as possible to the ocean through a flush toilet, which doesn't make a lot of sense, especially in Australia, which is as dry and old and flat. It's one of the oldest, driest, flattest continents on the planet. And so we definitely need to, have a better relationship with water and community.
David, Lydia asked a question about buying heirloom, non-GMO organic seeds.
Yep.
Can you help us with that?
Sure. There's I get all my seeds online from places like the Diggers Club, and also Eden Seeds have really good non-GMO varieties. Green Harvest, they're three really good ones. Yeah, I've personally been to Green Harvest myself up in Queensland and walked through their seed library, which is phenomenal. If you ever get the chance to go, it's just on the outside of Mullaney. And yeah, they've got an incredible setup.
Does anyone have any other questions they want to jump in with? Ask David.
I've got another 2 questions.
Go.
If that's all right. Earlier you mentioned, David, that you've got a lot of knowledge and experience around building dams and water management. I'm interested to know, do you completely avoid liners for dams?
No, not necessarily. If you need a liner, sometimes that might be the most straightforward solution. However, it's good from a design point of view to build it in a way that, like I wouldn't use a liner. I wouldn't employ the use of a liner.
Okay.
So you need to make sure you've got suitable clay properties in the soil where you're building.
Yeah.
And it's just about understanding if you're on that borderline level of clay, like if you've only got about sort of 20 to 30% clay profile, anything lower than that, you'd want to, like with excavators, for example, you have this thing called a shaker bucket or a sieve bucket. And what you do is you pick up a scoop of soil and you can actually sit there and shake it, just like gold panning or separating out material. And so you can actually take all the shale and the rock and all the stuff that's in it.
Yeah.
And give you good compaction.
Yeah. So you would suggest bringing somebody in to help dig out the dam, or even if you've found someone that had the skills to drive the machinery, it's still better to get someone that knows what they're doing with a big project like that.
100%. How big's the dam?
Well, there is no dam yet. I've got 5 acres, and but it's it's been overgrazed historically, and I'm looking to improve the soil quality and the capacity to harvest water as well. So yeah.
Whereabouts is your land, Susan?
Out at Young.
Okay, all right. What's the soil profile like where you are? Do you know what the clay content is? Do you know, is it sandy soil? What is it, loamy?
I haven't had it profiled by a professional, but there's cherry orchards all around, and I would consider it to be more clay than sandy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Depends on what side of Young. I've done a heap of work out there, and on the eastern side, back towards Yass and Goulburn, it's really rocky and red clay.
Yeah.
And on the other side, it's out where a lot of the cherry farms are on the way to Grenfell or somewhere like that. It's really it's clay, but it's a different clay. It's not the red clay.
Yeah.
But still very rocky out there. Lots of little boulders laying out in paddocks.
Yes.
Looks like God dropped his marbles.
Yeah, so you want to get rid of all those rocks.
Yeah.
You want to basically separate out the rocks and the clay. So it's got a little...
Oh, we're talking rocks the size of small cars, but hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So rocks the size of small cars, you'll probably use 24 to 36 ton excavator. And then, yeah, you basically need a consultant to come out to your land and just have a look. Someone with experience, someone that can, give you a really, really good, suitable assessment.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's okay.
The other question I had is it worthwhile attempting greenhouses, whether it's on an urban plot or on a larger property, when you are in a climate that, you know, like for example, you traditionally couldn't grow a banana, but you might manage in a greenhouse. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. I think diversity is the key to any resilient system. So the more diverse elements you can produce by, by building microclimates. So greenhouse is just a microclimate, that you're introducing to your locality. So the more that you can do that, then the more you're going to increase your resilience and ensure your food security. So I think it's a great idea. There's other elements to greenhouses too. If you're in a cold climate, you can put your greenhouse on, on the north or the western side of your house, and then the sun hitting the greenhouse will heat it up, and then you can actually funnel some of that excess heat into your living spaces. So heating your houses for no additional extra input, while you're actually creating a suitable growing climate for some of your food. Yeah, it's a common technique and strategy that's applied in permaculture worldwide, all the way up to Siberia, all the way as low as Patagonia, and people in those climates in really super cold climates, live most of their year in their greenhouses with their chooks. So chooks have a natural body temperature of about 42 degrees Celsius. We're 37.5, like it's our natural body temperature. So chooks actually do heat the space around them quite well.
Interesting.
Yeah. So with permaculture, you want to basically look at all of the different elements that you want to include in a system, and you basically list the pros and cons of each element. Like you weigh up the advantages and disadvantages. Can you live with disadvantages? Like the smell of the chook poo. If you can live with that, then that's a comfortable element to include in a cold space. To increase the comfortability, the climatic habitability of your living space. And it's a really good practice to do to think about all these structures and find what can work well together. Like, can your chook house and your greenhouse, what happens when you put them together? So you don't want your chooks eating all your shrubs, but if your chooks in that 42 degrees Celsius can heat that space up and provide a better germination environment for the seedlings, then that could be a good element to put together.
David, we're just getting a bit of feedback, so you might need to come real close to the camera. And also, Cherie has a question for you.
Sure.
Thank you. Just a question on lantana. We've still got a bit to clear, making a little bit, making use of that. You mentioned mulching, using it as a mulch. Is that composting at first to so all of the seeds, or just straight out mulching it?
You just rip it straight out and put it straight on the ground. Yeah, most of the stem in the bamboo's hollow.
Yeah.
And it's already quite dry as it is. So once you've pulled it out, it's not going to be pulling up water. It'll dry out really quick.
Yeah.
You can punch and break it up a little bit. It'll snap really easy. It's with permaculture, you generally want to grow your mulch. So, you look at things like green manure, acacias and wattles are really good for this. They're sort of midterm pioneering species. So they're things, this is how you would use your mulch generally. It's called chop and drop.
Yeah.
So as you're walking through your system, you're basically with a machete generally just maintaining, all these elements. And this is the way you would, you would use the lantana as well.
Yeah. And can you use lantana as a like a compost tea, a weed tea? Is it nutrient dense for then feeding back to plants?
I'm not 100% sure on the nutrient density of lantana. I haven't heard of anybody using it as a weed tea.
Okay.
The things that I would tend to go for weed teas and things like that would be more like comfrey.
Comfrey and nettle and
nettle,
yeah.
and then also seaweed. If you can get your hands on seaweed,
Okay.
that's fantastic because it
Yeah.
includes all of the micro trace elements that you get in the ocean.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Any other questions out there?
Hi, David. It's Jeff and Pete.
Okay, Jeff. And Pete.
And Pete's here too. We're going to tell you a little bit about the farm. You've covered a lot of area. We have 2 dams. One is approximately 1 megalitre. We have 2 swales, as you call them, feeding it from 2 directions. There's also a small spring that feeds water into it from above the clay. It's a light grey sort of clay in most of the dam area there, so it's pretty good. Second dam we call the turkey nest because it looks like a wok. It's 2 megalitres in capacity.
I think they're a bit bigger than that, but anyway.
We're being conservative. It's fed from a swale basically that runs down the hillside, and I've got two in that actually that cover it, that put water into that. There's a creek that runs across the property. That's a semi-perennial type creek. It's flowing nicely now because we've had a couple of months of rain or more. We pump water from that into the turkey nest dam because the other one is too far away and it's all spring anyway. And we use that water for our irrigation and the washing water, and we don't drink it, but we use it for everything else basically. We use no chemicals, weed killers or anything else like that on the property. The only thing that is sprayed around is copper sulfate.
Copper oxychloride.
Copper oxychloride to give the plants that need it, the fruit trees, a bit of a boost.
Apples and stone fruit.
Yeah, Pete's the gardener. I do the technology. We have solar off-grid systems that we run on. The nearest grid is about 1 kilometre away. We're in a valley. We have our phone hanging on the window here to pick up the signal from 5 kilometres away. You know, it's working today. If it rains, it doesn't work so well. Or if someone gets on the channel and takes the bandwidth that we need, and then we drop off. We've planted a couple of acres of potatoes. We've been doing that today a little bit more. We've got peas, about an acre of peas. We've got
be closer to half acre.
Half acre of peas, okay. 100 and how many fruit trees?
Oh, hard to say.
Hard to say.
It's over 100 anyway.
Yeah.
Pick there's 33 apple trees, so you know.
And we have a small veggie garden which is basically used for creating seeds. So we let practically everything there go to seed, and we're catching the seeds for planting next time round. That's the toilet bit came up because we're expecting to have a few more people living here soon, and we just wanted to. We had a plan to have a toilet flushing into a settlement type pond, you know, the double settlement type pond system. We hadn't got to do that because it rains so often that the tractor can only be used every 4th or 5th day between rain showers, you know, because the ground's so soft. The area was infested with broom for the last 20, 30, 100 years. It's been growing.
Scotch broom. Scotch
broom. It's been growing here for ages. We've cleared about 5 acres of that, which is where everything's sitting on at the moment. Grass grows very well here, and amongst the peas and the vegetables and everything else. So Pete uses a weed killer called a hoe, and he goes along and he chips it off. But we're way behind on that. So when we get some people here, we'll need them to be selectively pulling the weeds, that is the grass. Yeah. Pete's a naturopath, so everything growing, he says, oh, that's this, that's that, you know, it's good for this or good for that, you know. So we have a number of things growing which are beneficial for health in all directions. So we're cultivating them consciously.
Jeff, can I ask a question there? Because you mentioned about the toilet flushing into that system. I wanted to run that past David and see what you thought about that, because as a permaculture idea.
To move forward, it's no hassle to build a composting toilet. You know, you can be done in an afternoon with just a bunch of materials lying around. You can just grab a toilet seat and fashion it into like one of those 20-litre buckets you can get, like the paint buckets from Bunnings. That can be the start of your system. The back end of that, when the bucket gets full, it's good to have one to interchange to put in place of that, so you can, you know, swap it over and go straight away. The full bucket will then go out to your compost system, which is what I'd be teaching in the workshop.
So do you need a bunch of wood chips to make that work, and what else?
So
Hay.
wood chips, yeah, wood chips are the primary material, and that's just carbon. Anything that's brown, like leaves, sticks, wood chips, cardboard, paper, anything that's that has got that sort of carbonaceous, you know, type material, but is not green. It's not.
Back on that, I had the opportunity to look at and maintain for a while a small house about a couple of kilometres from here that had a commercial composting type toilet, little fan inside to blow the air through to keep it, and there was a spray, a chemical spray of some I don't remember what it was exactly, but the idea was that every time the toilet was used, a few squirts of this spray were put in to keep things going or starting or whatever. The problem that occurred here is that we're at altitude. That was at 1,200 meters roughly, and for 6 months of the year, the temperature is quite low, you know, down around zero. And the composting just simply wasn't working because they didn't have any heating type, functionality. So it was not good. In this case, though, I'm seeing what I studied a few years ago was basically the way you mulch grass. You know, you put a bit of water on and it sort of self-cooks. And that's essentially what you're talking about here, isn't it? Mix that with hay and straw and stuff and put a bit of water on and stir it over and it'll cook itself and then you turn it over.
Exactly. So the compost generates its own heat.
Yep.
It's not reliant on the climate that you're in. You know, people in cold climates use these composting systems to actually heat water. So they'll run actually a copper coil through the compost pile, and then the water moving through the coil will actually heat to that temperature we mentioned before. So anywhere between 60 and 70 degrees Celsius, which is really hot. You'll burn yourself under that temperature of water. You need to mix cold.
Yes, we're slightly beyond that, you know, being a bit urban type bit. We have a electric pump which runs off the solar system. We use the creek water as the water source from our tank, and we've got a 50-litre electric hot water system with a 3 kilowatt type rating on it. And I've got 6 solar panels on the roof of the shower room, which heat the water, boil it, in fact, when we don't drain it off often enough. And so we have hot and cold running water showers. It's really good, you know. So the plan is to extend that heating capacity into a greenhouse. We could have it automatically pumping the hot water into the greenhouse to form a thermal heating type component there, or we could use it elsewhere. Have you seen anyone doing that sort of thing before?
No, not like that, but that sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah, full of good ideas, eh?
David, I just want to be aware that there's some people that might need to jump off the call, and I am recording this for anyone who is watching this for later. So do you want to share with us what projects that you're up to, and also where people can find you if they're watching this replay?
The projects that we're on at the moment, I've just finished a couple of permaculture designs. So I did